All right.
All right, Jon, you ready to have some fun?
Let's rock and roll, man.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Jon, thank you so much for taking some time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot for inviting me, Dan. And I want to thank Jon Hammond and the NAMM organization for including me in the NAMM Oral History program. It's a great thing you're doing,
Well, thank
archiving and documenting all these stories. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Maybe a good place to start is where you think your passion for music has developed. Did you have a lot of music in your house when you were a kid?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was born in Chicago, 1953, and my father was a medical doctor, and I always say that my father was a physician, and my grandfather was a physician, and I'm a musician, you know. It's a lousy joke, but it's true. And, you know, my dad, he had really good ears, and he had good hands, you know, too. And he could play the Parade of the Wooden Soldiers. Amazing on the piano. We had this piano that had been in our family, Chicago Cable Company. And my mother was actually an excellent pianist and artist. She's a painter. She made a lot of sacrificed a lot of her artistic career to raise the family. We have 5 kids, 4 sisters. I'm the only guy, right in the middle. And you know, my dad, he they loved music, you know. So there was always a lot of music. We had this room, you know. In those days, the neighborhoods were very much a neighborhood, you know, like we knew everybody in the neighborhood. And in the summertime, it would get real hot, you know, so they would go around to different houses on different days, you know. They had the rubber pool in the front yard because nobody had air conditioning. So they would have all the kids go in the pool. Then the kids are out, you know, then it's adult time in the pool. And they would, you know, sit in the water to cool off, right? So my dad built on an annex on our place, which was a duplex on South Brennan Avenue in the south side of Chicago. And there we had the piano, and we had the first air conditioner in the neighborhood. So the whole neighborhood would come over and stuff into this room, right? So then we had this scene there, and there we had music in the room because there was the piano. And then, you know, all doctors all had hi-fi sets and organs, you know. Organs, you know, for some reason, the home organ business used to be a really big thing where you buy in with lessons and everything. And doctors, medical doctors, were really big customers for home organs, you know. So my dad, we got that later on when we moved to California. But everybody would come over, and he had a hi-fi set, because in those days everything was in mono, you know, monophonic hi-fi was the closest we had the stereo hi-fi then. So. And I remember, because my girlfriend knows, I remember things from even pre-speech. So like I can tell you about my earliest years in Chicago have very deep impression on me. And I remember the music they were playing. We had this record of Harry Belafonte with the Banana Boat song. That was a big hit there, you know. And we used to play all these records. So I guess the music started getting into me at that time. And then later on, I was at the tender age of 4. I moved to California with my family. We took the California Zephyr. My mother and a couple of my sisters and my eldest sister drove with my father in the family Rambler. They drove across with a canvas water bag on the front and some extra tires, the whole wheel, because the whole wheels would come apart. In those days, the tires weren't very good, so they had flats on the way. We went to Berkeley, California in 1957. And then my first instrument was accordion, you know. Although we had the piano, I did start learning by ear on the piano. I used to bang out, of course, like everybody, I wanted to be one of the Beatles, you know. I saw that, I said, that's got to be the greatest job in the world, you know. But I did learn by ear some things on the piano. But then when I really got serious about playing was on accordion. And then my father got a Lowry home organ, you know. And then I got into the organ thing. So that was our first organ, was a Lowry. And later on I got my first full-size Hammond organ I got when I was in an original rock band called Hades. I bought from Boss Skaggs, a model A103 and 2 Leslies in road cases. And then I got my first B3 when I was 18 years old, you know.
What was that like?
Was like heaven, you know, because I always wanted a B3, and before that I had put together what I called the poor man's Hammond, you know, which was a Fender Rhodes through a Leslie. And that was a very cool sound. It actually would sustain, and the Leslie effect, and it sounded kind of Hammond-like, so I called it the poor man's Hammond. When I got my B3, man, that was all over, you know. You know, I was playing with some great cats, you know. There was the music scene in the Bay Area was just so alive back then, in the late 60s, early 70s. Every weekend I was at the Fillmore Auditorium. I was just talking with Tootie Heath out here, you know, about Bernard Purdy. That was the first time I heard Bernard at the Fillmore, 1971, March, the live Aretha at the Fillmore with the Memphis Horns and the All-Star Band. So I was totally influenced by all the music that was happening around the Bay Area. And, of course, it started at home, you know. I got into the accordion. You know, I always say with the accordion, you know, a lot of friends of mine have kids now, you know, and we have all these unofficial God kids all over the world from all the musicians that I worked with. And when they tell me the kids are starting out to play, a lot of times they'll ask me, you know, what instrument should we start them out on, you know? And I said, well, I got my original inspiration from playing accordion, you know, so I think it's a great instrument to start on because you're really next to the instrument because you actually strap the thing on, you know. And every time you play an accordion, it's a lesson in theory, in harmony, because the buttons are arranged in fifths and fourths, and you have your chords already pre-made, so you learn about harmony, right? Every time you turn it on, it's a lesson in theory and harmony, you know. And it's a singing instrument, you know, and it's a first cousin to the organ. The accordion was my first real inspiration, you know. A junior jazz champion, 1966, you know. And I got my very first professional accordion right from John Molinari, who was one of the greatest accordionists that ever lived. So I had a Giulietti professional accordion with electric pickups on it. And I wanted to be like the Jimi Hendrix of the accordion, you know. So that's how I got started, you know. I got to say, my parents, you know, although my dad would always tell me, you know, music is a good hobby, you know, because he had patients all across the board. He had professional jazz musicians that were household names, you know, and they were, you know, losing their houses, you know. So he always tried to tell me, you know, music is a good hobby, you know. And so I always thought that he didn't want me to be a musician, but I found out later on that he was actually very supportive of it, you know, because he was real, you know, proud of what I did. But you wouldn't know it at the time because that's the way the old men were in those days. They were real hard, you know. And, you know, to this day, my mother says, you know, when are you going to get a real job, you know? So, you know, but there's no turning back now. I've been in this business for so long now, most of my life.
Do you have any favorite musical gigs that you've done that have meant a lot to you?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, I started playing for senior citizens. Was actually my very first gig was, I think I was 11 years old. I played accordion at a senior citizens luncheon, you know, and I got $25 and a free lunch, you know. And I said, hey, this is great, you know. I mean, $25, that was big money back then. And even today, $25, you know, that's some money, you know. So I said, yeah, you know, if I can make my living doing this. And so when I was a young teenager, I started doing some hospital gigs, you know. And nowadays, you know, I joined the union the first time in 1976 in Brockton, Mass. You know, I joined up the musician union. There was gigs that I was playing that I had to be a member of the union, and I've been in and out of the union. But since I came back from living in Europe for 6 years in '98, I rejoined up with the American Federation of Musicians Union, Local 802 and Local 6, and I'm a big activist for union musicians, and through the union I started getting regular gigs playing in hospitals and assisted living nursing home facilities through the MPTF, which it was called then, which was Musicians Performance Trust Fund. Now it's called Musicians Performance Fund, MPF, you know. And I would say of all the gigs that I do, and I've done a lot of weird gigs too, Dan, you know. Like I'm actually kind of writing a book right now that's sort of writing itself. It's called Weird Gigs I Have Played by Jon Hammond.
I like it.
Yeah, but I mean, you know, for me to play in hospitals and assisted living places, this is the top of the line for me. I get paid to do something that I would do for free anyway, you know. I can't tell you how many times I see the effect of the music, where the people get out of their wheelchairs, you know, and dance. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people get out of their wheelchairs. The sound of the accordion, if you play one note to somebody that they grew up, you know, with the accordion music, you know, you can make people cry with one note. You can make them get up out of their wheelchairs and dance, you know. And it's a kind of a medicine, you know. So the crazy thing is my father was a doctor, and now I'm playing in some of the same places where he practiced medicine. So we bring the music in there, and through the Musicians Performance Fund program, we get to do it, and they support that, although the fund is in trouble right now. And I think we all need to get together and get new legislation, get a new agreement with the recording companies and everything to get the money to support bringing live music into hospitals, into assisted living, into schools for the kids, you know. And so those are the gigs that, you know, for me, I take home a lot more than money from those gigs, you know. So, yeah, I would say probably for me that's the top of the line, you know. But also playing here at the trade shows is big for me too, because we play for the peers, you know. Last year I played downstairs in the Hilton lobby with Bernard Purdy, you know, and that was the first time that I got to do a showcase here at the NAMM show. And I've been playing every year at the Frankfurt Musikmesse, which is a sister show. So, you know, I just want to mention one thing, you know, like, because I got out there early, started playing gigs. I actually ran away from home with my accordion when I was 15, you know. That's how bad I wanted to do it, you know. And I followed a life of music. I never really had much of a record collection, because when you're traveling around, you can't take a big pile of records with you, you know. So I only had about 5 or 6 records, you know. But I made music, and I got into the recording thing pretty young. But when I went to New York, I got a studio situation where we set up our own studio, and we met our neighbor who also had, this was a building full of musicians called the Music Building. So Joe Berger was our neighbor. And we used to ride the elevator together, and we'd just say hi to each other. In New York, people don't get into big conversations in the elevator. You just pretty much say hi, and that's it. So it turned out that Joe was a great musician, and he was going to NAMM shows. And so we started getting into talking, and we made some music together, you know, and I've been doing this cable TV show. I'm still doing it. This is my 27th year. So it's 1986. So I'm a relative baby as far as these trade shows go. This is my 25th year. There are guys that you interview that have been coming to these things for more than half a century, right? So, Joe said to me one year, he says, "Hey, Hammond, how'd you like to come to the NAMM show, you know? And I said, what's a NAMM, you know? He said, don't worry, you're going to like it, you know? Just come with me to Anaheim, you know? So I had no idea what I was coming to, you know? So I came out to my first NAMM show 25 years ago, and we had such a blast, you know? And everybody knows Burger, and because my name is Hammond and he's Burger, everybody calls us Hamburger, you know? So we were two wild guys walking around, and everybody they see Joe, they say, yeah, now we see Joe, we know we can have a NAMM now, you know? So we had such a blast. He introduced me to all these cats, you know? And I got to know Glenn Derringer back then, and, you know, starting to do things with, you know, Suzuki was coming and take over the Hammond thing and save the company, you know? And so we had such a fantastic time at the NAMM show. So then the next thing he said to me after that, he said, you have a good time at that? I said, yeah. I said, that was killing, you know? I want to do that next year, you know? So he said, well, you know, let's go to Frankfurt to the music messe. He said, I want to take you to the music messe. I said, what's that? He said, well, if you like that, you're really going to like this one too, you know? So we went to Frankfurt to the music messe. So he said, when we get to Frankfurt, I'm going to introduce you to John Entwistle, you know? So, ah, you're kidding me. I said, I'm a big-time John Entwistle fan, you know? Because I came from the rock thing, got into jazz later on, but I loved The Who. And John Entwistle, you know, because I play the bass on the organ, I always listen to the bass. And Entwistle was the man. He just completely innovated the whole way of playing. Plus, I saw them live with Keith Moon several times, and the best show I've ever seen, you know. So I say, that'd be great if I get to meet Entwistle, you know. But I understand that the guy's busy and everything, you know. But in case I get to meet him, my roommate wrote out a list of questions. His name, Lazy Larry, was my roommate, and Lazy was from Boston. So he wrote some really inside questions to ask John if we got to meet him. So we get to Frankfurt, and Joe was playing for Engel Amplifiers then, right? The first night, we're in a suite at the Marriott Hotel with John Entwistle, drinking cognac and eating peanuts, you know? And I said, man, this is unbelievable. Here I am with John Entwistle, you know? So we hung out all night, you know, and then towards the end of the night, I remember, oh, yeah, I got those questions from Lazy Larry, you know? So I said, John, I got some questions for my roommate, Lazy Larry, you know? He said, oh, Lazy Larry, you know, who is this Lazy Larry, you know? So I told him he was from Detroit, and he was at his first shows in the States, you know? So I asked these questions. They were really good Who questions, you know? And then at the end, I realized, you know, I got to get him to sign something, right? So I said, John, I got to get an autograph from you. Can you sign something for me? So we had this plastic plate that with the peanuts were on, you know? So he pulled out a marker, you know, and he signed it for me. And we went back to this dive of a hotel we were staying at by the train station in Frankfurt. The next night we went to some other parties, and it was a slamming show. We were having so much fun, you know? I mean, you kicked it off by hanging out with John Entwistle, right? So the next night, me and Joe, we get back to the room. You know, I said, hey, that was great, Burger. I said, let me look at that plate that I had John sign, you know? So I'm looking for the plastic plate. Where's the plastic plate? So it turned out the housekeeping came in, you know? So I called up the housekeeping. I said, you know that plastic plate that was up here? Oh, yes, Mr. Hammond, we had the housekeeping come up, you know? I said, where's the garbage? They threw it in the garbage. 3 o'clock in the morning, I was out there looking through that. So to make a long story short, that plastic plate is on my wall in New York, you know? And, you know, after that, we were hooked, you know? We said, we got to go to NAMM and the Musique Messe every year till we're little old men coming in there with canes, and we're just going to keep on coming, you know? So, you know, Joe opened up the whole thing for me with the Musique Messe and the NAMM, and Glenn Derringer was my main man that brought me into the whole thing when he invited me to promote the XB2 organ that came out in '91. And he's the first.
Your first endorsement?
Yeah. You know, I was very close to some other instruments too, you know, but I didn't have a really, you know, I actually got on like on a poster, you know, with all the big organ names, you know, and I got that product when it came out. We know the guy who designed the XB2 organ, Mr. Ono. He's one of my heroes. When I finally met Mr. Ono, it was like meeting the Beatles to me, because he just completely blew the roof off of the whole organ thing, because I was so stubborn. Once I got into having the Hammond B3, I didn't want to play anything but a Hammond sound, you know? And there were other clone organs, but I only wanted to play Hammond. So, you know, we moved these things with dollies, you know, up and down stairs. You know, I almost got crushed by them more times than I can count, you know. And when that XB2 organ came out, and Glenn brought me one of the first 10 pieces to New York. So he invited me to the suite at the Sheraton Hotel, and he said, "Are you ready?" You know. I said, "Yeah, I think I'm ready." You know. So we go into this room, and there's something covered up with a blanket, right? He pulls back the blanket, voila, you know, there it was, you know, with a 122 organ, a 122 Leslie speaker. So he showed me a few of the controls. It was pretty basic, simple controls on the thing. He says, "Listen, I got to go in the other room, make a few phone calls, play the organ, you know, see how you like it." So he came back about 15 or 20 minutes later, and he said, "Well, what do you think?" I said, "Man, I love this organ." He said, "Well, I'm glad you do, because this one's yours." I said, "Glenn, you're kidding me. Unbelievable." I said, "You know, really, I can take this organ and do whatever I want with it, you know?" And he said, "Yeah." He said, "Just get out there and let the world know about it, you know?" So that was the year that they wanted me to play at the NAMM show for, you know, when the XB2 first came out. Unfortunately, my dad died the first day of the NAMM show, so I had to fly up to the Bay Area. So that wasn't to be. But 91 was a hard year in a lot of respects, but I got my organ from Glenn, and I just decided, you know, because we've been going to the Music Messe for a few years at that point, and cats have been telling me, "Why don't you come over here and live here for a while, play your music here, because people would dig your music here." So I was thinking, yeah, now I got the portable organ. So I told Glenn, I said, "You mean I can even take it to Europe or any?" He said, "Take it any place you want." You know? So I went to Frankfurt with it. I went there, and I didn't come back for a year. I showed up with that organ in a case that they had a lightweight case that it first came in that was only designed for a few uses. They called the case the Weekend Warrior. And it was like a molded case. It was real light, you know. It had these little clasps on it. And I took it over there in the Weekend Warrior case. There was only one of the EXP 100's expression pedals when it first came out. So I had to share that with Paul Schaefer, who was at NBC then with David Letterman, you know. And when Paul would call me up and he'd say, "I need the pedal." So I'd jump on my bicycle, I'd run up to Rockefeller Center, give him the pedal, and I'd take the, then finally I got to keep the pedal. So I said, "Okay, I'm going to take that organ to Frankfurt." So that Weekend Warrior case, I kept having to tape it up with gaffer's tape, with stickers all over it. My girlfriend knows that case, you know. That case, it looks so beat up. And you know what? It's been a long weekend for that case, you know. And I went all around the world with that organ, you know. And I still have 3 pieces of XB2. Now, we just came back from Hamamatsu, Japan. I got to meet Mr. Suzuki at the factory. We saw the factory. I got to play the newest edition of the Hammond B3 Mark II, which doesn't have mechanical tone wheels, but if you play it and you hear it, you wouldn't know it. It sounds so good, that organ. And the Leslie speakers are solid state, high power. So I got to go right to where they make them. And that opened up the whole thing for me. These NAMM shows, the Music Messe, the sister show, this is the greatest thing. Any professional musicians out there, or if you want to be a pro, like I could say, one word of advice to you young cats, because now I'm getting to be the old cat. I used to be the baby on the band and work with the old cats, and now I'm telling the young cats, you know, join the musicians union. You know, get active with the musicians union, and find a way through your favorite retailer, whoever you're buying your instruments from, to come on a day. If you can't come and be involved with the buyers or the sellers, then try to come on the guest day when you can be a guest, because you've got to come to the trade shows, because this is where it's at, you know. The best environment for music is the greatest. You guys are doing fantastic.
That's great. Well, you were recently over at the Hammond plant.
Yes.
Tell me about what you see there as far as the new organs that they're doing.
Yeah, well, that's a real interesting question, Dan, because we saw a lot there, and you know, like I said, this XB2 product, when it came out, you know, the Rolling Stones used it, the Grateful Dead used it. This was no toy. When this thing came out, this was a powerful, serious organ in a portable package, you know? And what they're doing there now, their engineers are way ahead of it. There's a lot of organ clones out there, but they are true to the Hammond tradition. They are making real organs and real powerful Leslie speakers that really kick, man. Yeah, I mean, it took a long time. They were the first guy who started making the real fantastic high-power Leslies was Bill Beer, who unfortunately passed away. He was here in L.A. He had a company called Keyboard Products. He did my Leslie conversion when I was 18. And he did Chester Thompson's, who was with Santana for over 20 years, Tower Power. And Chester played my organ when he first joined Tower Power. So those were it took a long time till they really started making these high-powered Leslies. But the new 3300W high-powered Leslie speaker, it's a lowboy, and this thing is deadly, you know? So you don't have to worry about getting covered up by the drums and the electric guitars anymore. This thing has what it takes to take care of business, you know? But there are some new products coming out, just like the iPhone thing. There's a lot of talk, a lot of rumors amongst the organ players, you know, and people were talking about the iPhone before it came out. There's going to be a new thing coming out. I really can't talk about it, or, you know, it wouldn't be good for my company relations, but I can tell you that real soon there's going to be some fantastic things coming from them, and we saw how they put the organs together by hand, you know. The instruments are all tested, each note, you know, and the main thing is, you know, there are so many different imitation Hammond organs out there, and they sound okay, you know. They have software that plays it and stuff, but when you play that and you play what they're making at Suzuki, here's the bottom line, here's the difference. These instruments that they're making, for some reason, they get the emotional effect that I'm looking to get, you know. And the other clones, they don't get it. When you play it, those organs that are coming out of Hamamatsu, when you play those things, when I play them in the hospitals, that's why I take those organs into the hospital, because they get the emotional effect that I'm looking for, you know. It really does the job. It's not a harsh sound, you know, it has a full range. The bass, everything, I don't know how you can explain it. It's nothing that you can put a finger on technically. They had $300,000 synclavier units that sampled directly from the Hammond organ that Stevie Wonder was using. But when you play the Hammond sound on there, for some reason it sounds cheesy, you know? It took a lot of engineering to get the real effective Hammond sound, and they got it, man. It really works, you know? So that's why I only play their instruments, you know, and the accordions, you know. I've been playing Excelsior Accordions for a long time. They don't make the Giuliettis. Giulietti was my first one. Oh, yeah, another thing I want to tell you. My first NAMM show, Art Van Dam introduced me to Giulio Giulietti here at the NAMM show. So And then I was hooked, you know, because my first professional instrument was a classic 127 electric Unedited accordion, you know. And there are pictures of me playing when I had hair down all the way, you know. And then I got to meet Julio, you know, so all these guys are gone now, you know. You and me right here, Joe Pass, Tommy Gamina, you know, you know, all these guys, man. You get to interview everybody, you know. It's a really, really big honor for me.
That's amazing. Now, did you ever do clinics in stores and that sort of thing?
I did, you know. I invented my own name for my first seminars that I was doing in Czech Republic, you know. I went to the first Czech, it's like a mini NAMM show, you know. It was pretty small, but they called it Musicus, you know. And I think they changed the name of it now. And the XB2 had come out, and I was over there with the organ I got from Glenn, you know, and I was going all over. So I went to Prague with it, and I did my first, what they called a seminar with the E on the end. That was the Czech thing, you know. And so I said, what am I going to call my presentation? So I called it Classic Hammond Sound, ... in a suitcase. And that was the name of my presentation. So I still call it that, you know. I just did one in just outside of Melbourne, Australia, at Bernie's Music Land. He's our big Hammond guy in Australia. And I still keep that name, Classic Hammond Sound in a Suitcase. So, I mean, now it's not exactly a suitcase, but I have this one case that everybody knows my case, and then the case, the Weekend Warrior case with the stickers, you know. So that's I kind of am known for pushing my gear all over the world. And you know these wheels that like UPS and FedEx uses, the Carter bag? That's made by a company from Joliet, Illinois, called Remen Carter bag. And these are all the musicians who are working musicians use the Carter bag. And it used to be that the flight attendants used them too because they would fit down the aisles in the airplanes. It's a USA-made product, you know. I always say, this is American technology. We put the man on the moon, we send the musicians down the road, you know. So I use the Carter bag Super 600, and with those wheels and the portable instruments that they're making in Hamamatsu, I've been all around the world more times than I can count. Which I just want to mention one more thing, because it's really important that I tell you about this one guy who put it in my head to do this. Because when I went to Berklee College of Music in 1973, I decided I would find a guy to study jazz accordion with, and I found this guy in Dorchester, which is just outside of Boston, it's a suburb, Giulio Giannatti. I actually found a YouTube of him before he passed away from like the 25-year reunion of 1962 class of Harvard, you know. So I went out to Giulio's house to study with him. So I actually bought a car from the Boston Phoenix to go out, to drive out there and take my music lessons with him. So the first time I went out to see Giulio, he had a studio with a B3, and then he had this room with his accordions and 2 music stands. And he said, you know, I want to hear you play a little bit on the organ, and now we're going to go sit down with the accordions and have your first lesson. So for my first lesson, he pulls out his accordion, and he puts it on my lap. He said, here's your first lesson, Hammond. He said, I heard you play the organ. He said, you know, you got a style. He said, don't let anybody change your style. Because not everybody has like something to say on the instrument. So he said, you got your style. Don't change your style. Don't let anybody change your style. He said, but I want you to look at this instrument really closely. And so I was looking at it, I was like, yeah, that's a nice box, you know. Giulio's box is a nice box, you know. He said, this was my ticket around the world 8 times. He said, I played in cruise ships. I played all these different gigs, you know. He said, I'm an old cat now. I can't do it anymore. He said, you're a young cat. He said, you can play your way around the world. You might never get rich doing it, but if you want to see the world and you want to play your way around the world, you can do it, you know? And so he put the idea in my head, and I went back to my apartment that night, and I was thinking, I never really thought about that, you know? Because I was just thought in my local sphere, you know, what's around me, you know? I never thought like, you know, especially when you're playing a B3 that weighs 425 pounds, how are you going to get around the world with that, you know, by the accordion, you know? So he said, you can take it, you can go around the world that way. So it was Julio who put it in my head that I can go around.
Very cool.
That's all he taught me on that lesson. But that was maybe the most powerful music lesson I ever had, you know? And I tell all the young cats now, you know, think globally, because, you know, especially now with the internet. Hell, we didn't have internet or anything then. I did everything with fountain pen. I wrote over 2,000 letters a year, you know, with this pen. But not this one, but with the fountain pen. I was in the post office all the time. Now we're on the internet, emails. I was a late comer onto the internet. And then I started doing cable TV in 1983. I started my cable TV show February 2nd, 1984. We went on the air. And I'm doing a daily radio program now. So you got to wear, I don't have to, because you're a hat guy, you know. That's how I picture you with the hat. You look great in the hat, man. You got to wear a lot of hats in the music business if you're going to make it. Because let's face it, the odds are against it that you're going to make it from just playing. So you got to be involved in the retailing, in the product development, in multimedia. That's where it's at now, you know. So I've been really fortunate, you know, just living under the lucky star. And the music is the engine, you know, and it brings you together with other musicians all over the world. I've played so many gigs with musicians that can't even speak a word of English, and we can play together on the bandstand. It sounds like we've been working together for 20 years, but then when we sit down at dinner, we can barely have a conversation because an E flat is an E flat all around the world, you know. So it's the only real universal language, you know. So I've been lucky and living under a lucky star.
That's great. Well, this is wonderful. I appreciate you taking some time and talking with us, sharing some of your stories with us.
A lot of memories, man. I got a lot of things. I could go on all day and night. I know you got a lot of people scheduled, so thanks a lot for inviting me, Dan. I just want to say the NAMM organization, you know, you're doing a great, fantastic thing here. And I always love the mottos that you come up with. Like, so, you know, this year, you know, it's take it to 11, you know. And, you know, we all try to turn up a little bit extra on our amplifiers. So, yeah, take it to 11. We're doing it. Man. Keep up the great job. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good job. All right. That was great. Awesome. Good stuff.